conversation, I wanted to begin with asking us some questions. First, if you would be open and as honest as you can. And since we're in Zoom, you don't have to quote unquote raise your hand so everyone can see you. But if you could just by hand gesture, raise your hand if you or someone maybe that you have known has ever experienced a mental health issue such as depression, anxiety, grief or loss, or stress. Anyone? Yeah. Keep your hand raised because you're among some of these popular individuals as well. And maybe some that we even do not know about. Keep your hand raised if you have been or you know someone that has been stigmatized because of their mental health issues and been told within the context of their faith community, well, you just have to pray harder or you need more faith. Yeah. Well, you're in some good company because there were other individuals who we know from biblical texts who dealt with mental health issues and concerns, such as Mary Magdalene, the various kings, Saul, David, Moses, even the man in Mark 5 who was cutting himself and in the tombs. They had mental health issues and were in some ways stigmatized by their faith communities for those issues. And then, if you would, raise your hand or signal in some way if your faith community has been a partner with addressing and helping individuals to address mental health concerns as it relates to their particular issues. Awesome. That's great. And so it is on that backdrop that I enter into this conversation today, really asking the question as we examine issues related to mental health and concerns, do we as the faith community, are we the friends or are we the foes? And I would argue that we can be and should be friends of individuals that are dealing with mental health issues and partner with individuals to help eliminate the stigma regarding mental health. Because we understand that mental health issues and concerns are not a new phenomena. I would argue that it is a tale as old as time and argue that mental health issues existed even when the first humans were created. They dealt with stress, they dealt with loss and grief, they dealt with fatigue, anxiety, depression, panic, and it's not new. We still deal with all of these issues and concerns even today. And so it would not be me as a researcher, and I would not give it to justice if I did not begin this conversation as I had you all to raise your hand to give you some statistics regarding mental health issues and concerns. So you all raised your hands when I asked the question around how many people have been dealing with mental health issues? How many people have experienced stigma around mental health issues? How many people find help within their faith communities as it relates to mental health issues? And what can we do or what are we doing in the battle against mental health concerns? And so just to give you a little bit of some statistics, we know statistically, NAMI reports, this is the organization for our national organization around mental health illness. We know that 1 in 5 individuals are dealing with a mental health concern within the US. Within that population, if you will examine, there are 1 in 20 individuals who deal with a serious mental health illness, such as notions of schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder or things of that nature, or a comorbid, coexisting issue such as depression and a substance abuse. And I think another factor that is very critical here that this particular slide gives reference to is that 1 in 7 youth between the ages of 6 to 17 have or are dealing with a mental health issue. This particular issue around mental health is, I believe, a social justice issue because while 1 in 5 individuals are dealing with those mental health issues, the next slide lets us know that there are nearly 50 million people that experience mental health issues that are then half of those are not receiving the treatment that they need as a result of either being underinsured, not insured at all, or not being able to get access to the resources that they need in order to get the help that they need to address their mental health issues and concerns. And so it becomes then a matter that's very important to us. The 3 main or common challenges that we might find individuals dealing with as it relates to mental health issues are usually common existing are anxiety, stress, and depression. We would probably see these being named as the top 3 across the board for all individuals that might be reporting mental health issues and concerns. What I believe is very significant, though, is when we look at the statistics around the Black or African American communities and dealing with mental health. We understand that Blacks or African Americans make up 13.4% of the U.S. population. Of that 13.4%, 16% report having had a mental health issue or illness in the past year. If we went to the previous slide that looked at 50 million Americans are dealing with mental health issues, 7 million of those individuals are Black or African American. That would say that that is a number that would be more than the populations of Chicago, Houston, and Philadelphia combined. 7 million African Americans are facing mental health issues within the last year of reporting. That is, as Dr. Johnson mentioned, the other dire issues and straits that we're in. Our mental health in the African American community or Black community is something that is in dire straits and should be addressed. Mental health is health. And as African Americans or Blacks, our mental health matters. It takes individuals approximately 11 years before they will report mental health illnesses or concerns and get help. And if we look just at this particular slide, almost 40% of those individuals that are looking for treatment are African Americans or Black. So I said a lot about mental health and mental health illnesses. Well, what is it? The Association for Psychiatry would explain mental health disorders or issues as a clinically significant disturbance in cognition, emotion, regulation, or behavior that reflects a dysfunction or a psychological or biological or developmental process underlying a mental function that is associated with significant distress, disability, or impacts their social, occupational, or other important daily activities. Robertson definition basically explains that mental health issues or concerns is centered around stuff. Everybody has stuff. Everybody has stuff going on that gets them to a place where they may be overwhelmed. They may experience stress, depression, anxiety, or other elements that inhibits our functioning in work, in school, and in our social interactions. And it's at that point that we should seek help. But who are we going to call? Who do we, within the context of our Black communities, call upon in order to get help? You all probably remember this slogan from the movie Ghostbusters, where it's like, who are you going to call? Well, we can't call Ghostbusters in order to help us with our mental health concerns. But who do we call on when we have a strong faith system or strong spiritual commitments and we are dealing with a crisis in our mental health? Yes, we can call on our divine presence and creator God. And also, who else do we call on? Pew Research shares with us that individuals, when they are dealing with chaotic life events, usually rely on about 4 individuals: a close friend, a family member, a mental health provider, and then running in a close fourth is the religious or spiritual leader. They feel most comfortable addressing their mental health issues with individuals within the same component of people: close friends, spouse, partner, immediate family member, therapist, our spiritual leader. There are not many people whom we call on when we're in distress. And 2 particular elements that I want to call out that we see in these 2 reports back from Pew Research are that, yes, they call on family members, yes, they call on spouses or partners, but immediately what comes to height is that they also call on pastors, leaders, and mental health care practitioners. We all know within the context of the African American community or within the context of faith communities that pastors and spiritual leaders are the go-to people. They are everything for the people in their respective congregations or faith communities, particularly within the Black or African American communities. The pastors are the spiritual leaders, they're the lawyers, they're the counselor, they're the doctor, they're the healer, they're the coach. Faith communities are the communities of first responders when it comes to addressing the needs within the community, when it comes to addressing issues around brutality from police officers, issues around voting rights, as we talked a little bit about, issues around food insecurity or housing insecurity or loss. Faith communities are the first responders. When it comes to addressing issues as it relates to mental health concerns around stressors, anxiety, and depression, our faith communities are our first responders. However, are they trained and ready to address the mental health concerns that people in the community and congregations face? I would argue that it's not reasonable to expect faith community leaders to be able to do it all on their own. As a faith community leader or as a minister and a pastor, through my training as in my DMin program, in my Master's of Divinity program, I understood that I only had 2 courses in counseling. And so for the issues that I encountered as an associate pastor dealing with pastoral care, very often I became overwhelmed with just the issues that individuals were bringing and found myself not knowing what to do when the issues were beyond the scope of my wheelhouse or beyond the scope of my training. So I would argue that it's not reasonable for faith communities and its leaders to do it all. But what can they do? The wonderful gifts of partnership and referral. Mental health care practitioners joining in with faith community leaders in order to address the mental health issues that we face. But we understand that with this, we have to address first the barriers as it relates to mental health services and individuals encountering the need for assessing mental health issues. First there is amenability. Are we open to counseling? Are we averse or closed to counseling and therapy? In my research, I understood and discovered that we're about 50-50. There's some of us who are on the openness side, but there are others of us who are averse to it, and rightfully so. What about accessibility? Are there mental health care providers available within our communities? Is the services affordable? Can we afford to pay self-pay or out-of-pocket fees? Does the provider accept insurance? What about availability? How long is the waiting list? Will it take us 2 months in order to see someone? And then there is this fifth element of alliance, because this talks about how will I be able to relate to, trust the mental health care provider? Is this someone that my religious leader has referred or has a relationship with? Can I trust this person? Do they look like me, or do I have to engage them in the story in order to understand my journey? Are they culturally responsive? Are they spiritually and or theologically trained and informed? Are they trauma informed? Can they help me with my particular situation? The main two barriers that individuals encounter when we think about mental health care services, while these are listed of openness and accessibility and affordability and availability and whether or not they're represented in the space, also comes two cousins, if you will, mistrust and stigma. And mistrust of mental health care providers is full of examples. We have legitimate reasons within the African American community to mistrust the healthcare system and mental health care providers, just based on how our ancestors were improperly diagnosed with mental health disorders, such as the fraudulent drapetomania, which claimed that enslaved individuals were running away that escaped from chattel slavery were insane. Let's not forget the medical malfeasance of the Tuskegee syphilis study, Henrietta Lacks's stolen cells for cancer research. The mistrust within the system is legitimate. In the Black community, as it relates to sharing what has happened with us, our parents would often tell us, don't go out telling our business. You all could probably rehearse with me the saying that was very familiar. What goes on in this house stays in this house. And so those issues of mistrust of healthcare providers, of mental health care providers, are not without cause. There also are issues around racism, issues around prejudice and bias, ways to eliminate some of these particular issues and concerns is that we have more trained, trauma-informed, theologically and spiritually informed, and culturally responsive mental health care providers. But then alongside the mistrust in the healthcare system is the issue of stigma that is prevalent within the African American community and then within issues of mental health in general. Individuals will not seek help because of stigma. Because with mental health issues and the stigma around it, people see individuals within a negative way because of their issues. How many people saw the man in the tombs cutting himself and doing all the things that he did in a way that was uncommon, not normal? Something is wrong with him. But he was able to be healed by a word spoken from Jesus. Some often think that mental health concerns is not health, that it's a character flaw. Believing that an individual's mental health issue is self-imposed. It's not something that is genetic or passed on, and you alone should be able to help fix your own mental health issue. That is so far from the truth. We know from researcher Dr. DeGuy on her research around post-traumatic slave syndrome, where we understand how issues and matters from chattel slavery that our ancestors dealt with and survived, how some of their particular issues and concerns were passed down through our DNA. And as a result, we face issues and concerns today as a result of that. And so we also know from research that some particular mental health issues are genetic, that they are issues that are imbalance of chemicals within our brain makeup, of hormones that need to be balanced. And so how can we as a particular individual fix that on our own? We cannot. Or something is wrong with you, you're flawed, you're not normal. The Creator, God, created us and said that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Even in our flawedness, we are perfect. And so being able to help individuals eliminate the stigma around mental health is very important. And then there comes the question of spirituality. Individuals do not talk about their mental health issues, mainly because they will say that it is a question of our faith. If our faith was enough or strong enough, we could overcome. Or maybe it is because of sin that this is happening. But remember in the text in the Gospels, when Jesus came upon the man who was blind and his disciples asked, well, who sinned or who caused this? And Jesus said, no one. This is for the glory of God to be revealed, and the man was healed. And so in the same way, letting people know that it is not a lack of faith that they're dealing with their mental health issues or it seems to be overwhelming. It is something that they need help with. We also see, as we understand the mental health issues and the stigma around it within our media, and often being bombarded by issues around mental health is something that's very important to understand. In a recent conference, theologian and psychologist Dr. Shanika Walker-Barnes shared that we live in a trauma genetic society. We are continually being bombarded by traumatic events that have an impact on our emotional and mental health. And so we are getting hit from every side. And so it is without a whole lot of jumping that we understand that people are facing mental health issues, and these people that are facing mental health issues find themselves within the context of our faith communities, and the individuals that are first addressing those mental health concerns are our pastors and spiritual leaders. When we see the issue of mental health within the media, we understand that it is usually from a biased lens. Who's reporting on the mental health issues? When is mental health in the spotlight? It's usually under a negative connotation. Who chooses to report it? How can these avenues decrease the stigma around mental health as well? We also see the political and economic aspects of mental health and the disparities as relates to race, gender, socioeconomic status, and the opinions of the mental health care providers. It's interesting to note in this particular diagram that African Americans, 15% report that if they were of another ethnicity or race, they felt that their mental health would be treated differently. Also, we understand that addressing some of the mental health disparities in the community relates to individuals' employability. If individuals are able to be employed, their mental health issues and concerns tend to wane, and they feel as though they are making an active contribution to society. Some of this comes through the services and the mental health care provisions within the Affordable Care Act that's existing and being eliminated in some parts, but it still exists. Community involvement that then allows for resiliency, equity, and social capital, meaning that they feel that they're contributing to their community. And so our faith communities come into play when individuals that are dealing with mental health issues can be a part of community and be employed within the context of community and show that they matter and that they belong and that they can contribute. How then, as we move, can we address the mental health needs? Through therapy, understanding where the mental health care resources are. No longer are asylums exist. There are some mental health care facilities, but we find sometimes very often that individuals that are dealing with mental health issues find themselves incarcerated, which is a detriment to their mental health care services and their mental health wellness, mainly because the prisons and or incarcerated institutions do not have the services to be able to provide individuals with proper care within those facilities. And we might ask the question, well, how do individuals find themselves within that context? It's mainly because when individuals are dealing with mental health concerns within community, rather than calling or taking them to a mental health care facility, individuals within the context of the law enforcement is called. Individuals then, rather than being transported to hospitals, are transported to prisons and are incarcerated in those environments that do not have the resources to help them. And another resource that is not last but or least is our faith community and its leaders. I talked a little bit about this. And so what can we do? Partnering together to combat the mental health crisis within our communities. Partnering with faith community leaders and healthcare providers. Understand that it is a meeting both of the mind and the spirit. Working together so that faith community leaders can be prepared to triage mental health needs within the community. And then finding therapists or counselors who are trained to integrate spirituality and religious practices within the therapy and counseling interventions. And so I'll talk now and shift the conversation to these ways in which we can combat the mental health illnesses or concerns within our community and eliminate stigma. So for our ministry and community and faith leaders, who are the mental health care professionals within our communities? These are questions that we can begin to ask. What about within the locale of our faith community, church, synagogue, mosque itself? Who are those individuals? Where are the mental health care agencies or facilities in our community? Who do we call for wellness checks on members that we know are dealing with mental health issues or that we want to be make sure that they get to a place that they are able to be treated well? What are those services within our communities? How are they available to us? Something that I missed to make a reference here is in most cities and states, the emergency number are not 911, but usually the non-emergency 211 is a resource that is available for individuals to be able to find services to help with their mental health care. What are the crisis hotline numbers? Do our community and faith leaders know and are aware of those crisis hotline numbers, both for individuals that are dealing with mental health crisis, for our veterans, and for others? These are resources that are very important as we begin to think about how do we triage the issues as it relates to mental health. First, working to eliminate stigma, but then understanding what are some resources available to us that we might be able to respond to the crisis at hand. How then can we become prepared in order to be able to handle the issues within the context of our faith communities? The National Alliance of Mental Health Illness, NAMI, has a mental health first aid training. The one I list here is the one that's local to Indianapolis. However, it is available in all states. In a 12-week status and series, individuals can become mental health first aid trained in order to be able to recognize issues that are happening within the community and within their faith houses as well. These trainings can happen for large groups of individuals. They can happen at particular facilities and within organizations as well. In addition to NAMI, there is also SAMHSA that helps us deal as well with mental health services and with substance use and or abuse issues as well. We can also host conversations around mental health issues and wellness during mental health wellness months, such as May, the Mental Health Awareness Month, June being Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, and even this month, July, being Minority Mental Health Care Awareness Month, providing an opportunity for the community to learn more about mental health wellness as we do with other health fairs and other health priorities. As we partner together to address the mental health care concerns, when we work together in community as faith leaders and among and with practitioners of mental health, we can overcome the barriers of amenability, availability, affordability, accessibility, and alliance by educating and being informed. Recognizing that mental health is health. Wellness fairs, when we check for common physical related health issues and concerns, we can include mental health checks and screenings and encourage people to follow up with their medical and mental health care providers. We can help to eliminate the fears about our mental health issues by being informed and providing education. We can help to eliminate the stigma by talking about the mental health issues and even being honest and transparent with our own mental health concerns. Everyone deals with stuff, remember? We can invite mental health practitioners in for a panel discussion. We can partner with agencies to assist in providing clients with low-cost sessions. And I think that it's very important that we can remind people that it is okay within the context of our congregation and faith experience to have God and a therapist and to take their medications. And then what if the therapist or counselor was trained to integrate spirituality or religious practices within the context of their therapy interventions? Franklin Boyd and Lockwood state that spirituality is one of the many powerful aspects of human experience and life. And more than any other throughout time, it has offered the hope and solace to those who are suffering. It says to us that spirituality is important. And so when we're looking at ways to cope for African Americans, religious and spiritual practices are going to be involved. Culturally specific coping will be a part of it. And individuals will make use of mental health care services. Spirituality and religiosity has been recognized as the essence and the existence of one's entire life, both personal and collective. Religious involvement and institutions have been gateways for African Americans for a deeper spirituality. And meaning making is at the heart of religiosity and spirituality for African Americans. So it's important that this would be a part of the interventions that's used within the context of mental health care. We know from the literature, as we're dealing with psychological distress and individuals seeking out care, that there's an association between socioeconomic status, education, gender, and psychological distress. There's a link between psychological distress, religious struggles, and religious crisis. There's an increase in mental health issues and concerns and contrast when individuals are seeking mental health care services where faith is included. And those obstacles or barriers around that stretch from Maslow's hierarchy of need to mistrust and stigma are some of the barriers. Some of the resources around Afrocultural coping, where individuals are able to utilize resources and rituals that are components of their culture, is very important for people of African descent. And then individuals such as older adults and women and younger adults find themselves to be open to mental health and medical professionals who address their concerns, particularly when spirituality and religiosity can be included. But the problem very often is, from the movie Encanto, you'll probably remember the song that We Don't Talk About Bruno, right? And so very often within the context of counseling, we're not leaving space for spirituality. And sometimes within the context of our faith communities, we're not leaving space for conversations around mental health. And that creates a dilemma. Neither topic and neither context should be off limits. Clients and people in our congregation want to have the conversation to include spirituality within the context of their therapy and include mental health within the context of their spirituality as well. How can we have an honest conversation about these important topics? We know that there is an improvement in clinical outcomes when spirituality and religious practices are included. Clients desire to have those resources of spirituality and religious practices as coping mechanisms for their life challenges and stressors. 78% of Americans report that spirituality and religious themes are as very important in their lives. And clients want it integrated in their therapy, but may not approach the topic because of the bias of their therapist or judgment. And so it's important then for mental health care practitioners to utilize spirituality within the context of the work with their client. If we're addressing it holistically and we leave out spirituality, then we're leaving out a part that's very important to our clients. So here I share that there are implicit assessments, there are explicit assessments, and there are some challenges with the assessments, but make sure that they're culturally relevant. We want to address the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. We have to be culturally aware of the ways in which we are othering individuals. We leave out things within the context of the work that we do with clients and impose our own views. We want to make space in the conversation to broach spirituality and explore ways that we can, as clinicians, include spirituality within the context of the work. As I wrap up this small conversation around how we just scratch the surface to eliminate the stigma and eliminate the barriers to mental health within the context of our faith communities, here are some things that I would like to just leave with us as faith community leaders and as faith community participants, if you will. Faith communities and its leaders are the first responders, the first line of defense or contact for individuals in the community. But you do not have to do this work alone. Remember the wisdom of Moses's father-in-law when he was attempting to counsel and judge all of the issues on his own. He told him to get some elders, get some leaders to help you do this. You cannot do this work alone. Partner with mental health care providers within the context of community, within the context of your faith communities, so that we can address the issues that our individual community members are facing. As a spiritual leader, know your limits and use the gift of referral. There are wonderful mental health care professionals and counselors in training in the community who can incorporate spirituality and religious practices within the context of the counseling experience. Seek out those individuals. Use a holistic approach to wellness. We are spirit. We live in a body, possess a soul, and live with and navigate emotions, feelings, thoughts in our mind. Affirm the need for emotional healing alongside spiritual and physical healing. Our emotions are not evil, good, or bad. They exist. They are there to tell us something. Ask them like an old friend, what do you have to say to me today? Addressing mental health concerns is a social justice issue. When we look at the percentages of individuals within the African American community alone who are reporting mental health concerns just within the last year, and how those services are being impeded by whatever barriers, we know that there's a need. And as a faith community and a leader within the context of the faith community, I encourage us to be a friend, to be a support system, to be the place, one other resource where people within the context of our community can come to and get help. That's the end of my piece of the conversation. Are there any questions? Any comments? Any concerns?
Well, I just want to thank you for the presentation. I am an ordained deacon in the Episcopal Church, and we have a mental health task force with the Union of Black Episcopalians, and it is a social justice issue indeed. But one of the things that your presentation also reminded me of, I know a young lady, I don't know her personally, but she wrote a book at the University of Memphis that says, "What goes on in my house stays in my house."
Yes.
It was Dr. Valerie Johns and Dr. Ronnie Priest. But that stigma in our community is real.
Yes.
And oftentimes we have been taught, so some of the information that you've given us is also about a cultural change for us as
Yes.
well, being able to say that we're not okay and being able
Mhm.
to share resources and also share our stories so that we can uplift and help others. So that's what we try to do with the mental health task force, but with some programs in the Episcopal Church for Black Episcopalians and even the mental health first aid training. We
Mhm.
found that when we have someone who is not from our community who is facilitating that training, we're not open to even attending that training. So
Yeah.
we have just one person who has been facilitating that training as well. So thank you very much for the resources and just heightening our awareness of how serious some of the issues are within our community, which we already knew, but
Mhm.
as that book says, what goes on in our house stays in our house, and we don't always
Yes.
share it. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for the work that you're doing. That's phenomenal. And thank you all for the comments in the chat as well. Other questions, comments? I wanted to use my polls. It would have taken a little bit more time, but I was trying to be mindful of my countdown time as well. Great. Anyone else, they're within the context of their congregations are doing some work as it relates to mental health care, and or training, or is this very new to you? Is this something that you're like surprised that's happening, or surprised that we could do this within the context of churches? Or surprised that there are spiritually and theologically informed clinicians that can do the work.
Good morning. I will
Good morning.
jump in and say that our church, New Sardis Baptist Church, here in Memphis, our pastor, Dr. Darrell Harrington, is very passionate, very committed about the well-being of our congregation. So we have a wellness ministry that dedicates time, space, and resources for mental wellness. So very proud to be a part of a congregation where mental, just wellness, total well-being is a priority, which addresses mental illness.
Thank you so much for sharing, Mrs. Whitmore. I appreciate that and wonderful work that your church is doing within that context. I'm glad to hear. Thank you. Well, if all minds are clear, Ashley, that concludes my presentation time and questions and ways that I wanted to engage. Thank you all so much for the ways that you have engaged. Thank you for taking the time and opportunity to hear a little bit about something I am very passionate about as I think about within the context of the work that I do in the context of training clinicians to become spiritually informed in the context of partnering with faith communities in order to make this issue and concern heighten. And so I thank Dr. Johnson for this opportunity to share within this context and this platform as well. So God bless you all and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, hopefully.